Good morning.
Good morning.
It's really nice to see all of you. Um, so the title of this Dharma talk is Zazen, our essential practice. And as I had some wonderful discussions with three of you this morning and realized I wish I'd talked to you before I'd even written this Dharma talk. And it's so incomplete. But the top, Zazen, our essential practice, and then the question at the heart of it is what supports our Zazen practice. What supports your Zazen practice? What supports my Zazen practice? I mean, that's got to be an incomplete talk. And there's got to be lots of blanks, and I'm counting on all of you to fill in the blanks. We'll have some time at the end of this talk. And this talk is going to be what supports my practice, because that's what I know. But it will be different. It will be, there may be similarities, but there will also be differences between what supports my practice and what supports your practice. One thing that I realized in talking to folks this morning is I left out the most practical aspects of it. And again, I'm counting on you to bring those things up. But the Buddha, in his own words, which I wish I'd reviewed before getting online this morning, talks about what supports our meditation practice. He mentions such things as having a designated area, keeping it clean. Maybe that have it be an area where you're not likely to be interrupted, although we have only minimal control over that. But there's some very practical things that support our practice. But that would make for a very short Dharma talk. And so what I've done is I put it in a certain context, just as a way to present what supports my practice as just a leaping off point for what supports yours. Maybe this will just give you something to think about. So, Dharma talk. I got some kind of little message here. Open all rooms. I don't know what that's about. Close all rooms. Marla, I don't know what this is. Anyway, there we go. So, as this question flows through my life and practice, I've realized that how we answer it depends on the causes and conditions of our individual lives. There are no wrong answers. For example, someone who leapt directly into Appamada's fully formed relational practice may have different perspective on this question than someone whose sitting practice began a long time ago with only instructions. So what supports practice may be different for someone with kids at home and a full-time job than it is for a retired person living alone. All I know for sure is that no matter who we are, what we need to maintain Zazen practice changes with the fluctuating causes and conditions of our lives. In fact, what one needs to support sitting practice today is likely to be at least slightly different than what you needed yesterday. So, this is a question for our lifetime. Sometimes it's astounding to me that anyone would ever do this, that anyone would ever sit upright silently for a significant period of time. And I'm not even totally clear. In fact, we were talking about this in one of the practice discussions. I'm not even totally clear why I began this at all. So where does this impulse come from? We learn from Dogen's teachings that Zazen is enlightened activity, not a state of mind. So each of us are an expression of Buddha nature. Eventually, causes and conditions are such that one fine day we find ourselves sitting silently on a cushion or a chair. But how, for you, does that first sit become a well-established regular practice? There are countless ways to approach this question. For today, simply because when offering a Dharma talk, one has to choose something to say and how to say it, I'm going to approach this question through the framework of the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The three treasures are one support of my own Zazen practice. Also, I think the three treasures cover a lot of territory. It's my hope that you may find something useful here to think about. My personal experience of the three treasures is that they are inseparable, interrelated aspects of our whole practice life. First, the Buddha treasure. Peg writes in Appamada Daily Chants Annotated, Buddha, which means not only the historical figure who inspires and illuminates our path, but the Buddha nature within us, the eternal light that is our very life. Often when we sit, this eternal light shines on something about ourself or our thoughts that we need to know. Sometimes, maybe just for a moment, we sit as the light itself. It is our home, our own Buddha nature. In either case, the Zazen light of Buddha nature can become its own motivation. We begin to sit Zazen because it is the natural, enlightened activity of our truest self. This first treasure supports my own regular Zazen practice only if I pay attention to it. The second treasure is Dharma. It seems to me that in a way, the formless light of the first treasure takes a slightly more tangible form in this second treasure. Whereas the Buddha treasure can be described as light, the Dharma treasure takes the form of words, of teachings. We could say the light speaks. With the Dharma treasure, there is some tangible guidance for our day-to-day living. Peg writes, Dharma means not only the brilliant teachings of the historical Buddha, but also the wisdom teachings of the awakened teachers, men and women who followed this path, and the teachings we are offered in every moment of experience in our daily lives. Reading the Dharma was my very first support for establishing a sitting practice. This was in the early 80s, and at that time, there wasn't a Zendo on every street corner like there practically is now. Anyway, I lived in rural Kentucky. Oh, somebody needs to come in. At that time, I was living in rural Kentucky, and really the only access I had to Buddhism was through books. The first book I read was from one of the early translators who was clearly influenced by a Christian perspective. And it was my understanding that he was saying that everything in life is suffering, everything. And although there was plenty of suffering in my life, there were a lot of things about life that I liked. So I wasn't so sure about this Buddhist thing. But then I read the mustard seed story, and many of you know this story. It's a teaching on the universality of grief, loss, and impermanence. So reading that story, I could see and feel the truth of that. So with that, with book in hand, I was encouraged to go ahead and sit on the cushion. and follow those instructions from that book. That was the beginning for me. So from the beginning, Dharma has been influential for my sitting practice. The most recent examples of Dharma teachings that keep me coming back to the cushion are just some examples, or Dogen's teachings on Uji, on time, Reb Anderson's commentary on the third turning of the wheel, and Mel Weitzman's book about Zazen as the essential practice. And of course, we learn about the Dharma from our real life teachers, friends, and the situations we encounter. The Dharma treasure keeps me returning to the cushion again and again. Excuse me just a minute. I'm going to take a quick pause. Right back. So, the Sangha treasure. For many of us who practice together at Appamada, this aspect of the three treasures is very close to our hearts. Peg and Flint teach and model what they call relational practice, but they didn't create relational practice in a vacuum. It is a deeply insightful emphasis on the Buddha's own teachings. The word Appamada, as many of you know, encompasses the Buddha's final teaching to his disciples. The word means mindful, energetic care for one another in all aspects of this world we live in. Throughout the Buddha's teachings, he mentions the importance of Sangha. Just as Dharma, which is expressed usually as words, seems more tangible than the subtle light of the Buddha treasure, the Sangha treasure is even more tangible in our practice life. We practice together. Sitting with other people, whether online or in a zendo, certainly supports my practice. Sort of like having a walking buddy motivates actually tying your shoelaces and making it out to the park. The simple presence of others helps to keep me showing up. Plus, the supportive presence of others keeps me from hopping up from the cushion after 10 minutes thinking there's really something else I need to be doing. So maybe you've had that experience. Need to go to the grocery store now, that kind of thing. The first treasure, Buddha, and the third treasure, Sangha, seem intimately connected to me. As we sit Zazen in the light of Buddha nature, we sometimes become aware of how deeply interconnected we are to everyone and everything in our world. To me, that seems like the birthplace of Sangha. One important thing about Sangha to me is having real live people with whom to practice Dharma teachings. This aspect of Sangha supports our sitting practice probably more indirectly than directly, but it certainly gives us a real life opportunity to practice the Dharma. This is especially true when we've had a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, or maybe we've just made a mistake and it's distressed somebody. Together, we have an opportunity to practice the Noble Eightfold Path and the perfections. The Sangha treasure can support our sitting practice and also give us an environment to practice the Dharma on a day-to-day basis. It's often a combination of the three treasures that support my regular Zazen practice. Many times the Sangha treasure keeps me from getting too lost in emptiness, the emptiness of the Buddha treasure. But there have certainly been times in my life when one treasure or the other was dominant, was my main support. And this may also have been true for you. An example of this, one of my Dharma buddies wrote a beautiful description of how the Sangha treasure is currently the primary support of her practice. I'd like to read you her words. She says, "There is no written or spoken teaching that could have helped me establish a sitting practice of any kind. The ways others have helped me establish a regular sitting practice are sitting Zazen with me, talking to me about their practice and the Dharma and their experience, moment by moment. I could never have established such a practice alone. So in my experience, true connection is the key. Deeply present, compassionate, authentic connection. So I think this is very wise and very beautiful, and an example of how sometimes one of the treasures more than the others is guiding your sitting practice. So Zazen is our essential practice. That doesn't mean it's our only practice. It's just the beginning. It's maybe you could say it's at the basis of everything. It's at the basis of the Four Noble Truths. It's at the basis of how we practice the Eightfold Path, the perfections, and so forth. But it's essential. It's at the basis of everything, or at least that's the way it seems to me, and that's also what I was taught. Our teachers make it clear that Zazen is our essential practice. During my first year or so of practice discussions with Peg, it puzzled me that she was so focused on my sitting practice. For the longest time, I was asked to formally begin each session by stating my first and last name, followed by saying, "and my practice is." And my very first response to "and my practice is" was, "and my practice is Zen." And Peg very quickly corrected that and said, "Zen is not a practice. Your practice is Zazen." So that was an interesting correction for me, an interesting thing for me to think about. And so we went on like that for like at least a year. And it felt very silly to me that I would have to say my whole name, or anyway, I was requested to say my whole name. But looking back on it, that brought me right to this present moment. It was a very grounding thing for me to have to do, to say, "and my name is Ellen Hippard, and my practice is Zazen." And then I would proceed to tell her the details of what my sitting was like. And as I did that, Peg could see what I needed to know, and proceeded to help me to discover Shikantaza, Zazen, which has made all the difference. I have a secondary teacher, Pat Josho Phelan. And it was only my second practice discussion with her when the poor thing got to hear the whole confused, self-absorbed story of whatever upset I was currently going through. And she listened patiently, kindly, empathetically. And then she said, "So, what about your practice?" And I hardly knew what to think. She said, "So tell me about your sitting practice." And I felt almost disregarded, but not quite, more like, oh, it was sort of a little wake up. And when I told this story to Peg, and her comment was, "She sounds like a good teacher." So lately I've noticed that every Dharma book I read is either directly or indirectly about Zazen. And this is true from the writings of Dogen to Joko Beck and everything in between. It's often a combination of the three treasures that support my regular Zazen practice. And many times the Sangha treasure keeps me from getting too lost in emptiness. But there have been, let's see, I think I'm rereading something here. Let's go to page 7. Sorry, guys. So if Zazen is our essential practice, it seems pretty important to question what supports our practice. So what supports your practice? Your answer may not be the same as mine, probably won't be. And for you, the three treasures may not have much to do with it. There are so many ever-changing causes and conditions that affect what we need to return to the cushion over and over again. What supports your practice may be extremely tangible and practical, or it may seem lighter than air and difficult to verbalize. So, thank you for listening. And what I'm really looking forward to is hearing what supports your practice. What keeps you coming back? Is it related to what got you to the cushion in the first place or not? Or absolutely whatever question comes up for you about your Zazen practice. So what I'd like to do, and Marla and I have discussed this, is we're going to break up into breakout rooms of two, sometimes there'll probably be three people. And we'll be in those breakout rooms for about 15 minutes. The first 5 minutes will be a time to reflect, maybe write if you like. And then the next 10 minutes with time to share with your partners in the breakout room what supports your practice. And then after those 15 minutes or so, we will come back to the big room, back to the Zendo, and have a chance to share with each other. So,
The Zendo is with you.
thank you. The force is with us, huh?
That's the whole business.
That's the whole business.
Force.
The force, or Sangha. Buddha says the Sangha is the whole thing, but my personal opinion is they all are the same thing. But what about your personal opinion? I want to know what happened in your groups, what came up for you personally, and what supports your sitting practice? Why do you keep coming back? You know, when I sat and Milan and I were in a group, even though I've thought about this for weeks, my first thought was, I don't know. I don't know why I keep coming back. And I had to go back to the very beginning. In fact, when I was speaking with someone in a practice room, and we had to sort of talk about the beginning too. So anyway, raise a hand. I see Genevieve.
Hi, Ellen.
Yeah.
Thank you for this exploration. You know, it's funny how a simple question can lead to a completely different experience every time you ask it. And I find this is one of those. And I started my writing by writing, my name is Genevieve Maxwell Gill and my practice is Zazen.
Love it.
And this is what I wrote. Connection supports my practice. Zazen, and this surprised me, I didn't see this coming. Zazen is my center, my anchor, the keel of my boat. It helps me live in a more centered way. It helps me take care of myself so that I am less needy, jealous, and resentful in relation to others. Somewhat mysteriously, bringing myself into full attentive presence with my body and mind has helped me become less self-absorbed. And also my Zazen practice is a relational practice with myself. And I was missing a center. And now I find myself, you know, in communication with, say, a family member I've known my whole life. I'll have my habitual thought and then I'll just notice it and I'll think, yeah, or, you know, this other way of thinking, you know, and it would just drop the old, you know, approach and just say, you know, that's fair, you know, that's valid. I understand, you know. So thank you for asking the question.
Thank you, Genevieve. Now, I can't see the Zendo very well, so you guys are going to have to speak up. And also, I can't see everybody online, so you may have to let us know, prompt
I'll
us.
monitor for that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll speak up.
Is that Kim's voice? And then after Kim, then,
That's Kim.
okay, Kim, then Joel.
Here's what I wrote. I have no practice that is mine. I was struck by lightning, bang, and the practice infected me. I don't own this. It is in me, but also outside of me. It is not me or mine. I didn't choose this or even the life I have. I was born as a result of some chance operation and then tried to grow up in an interdependent world. Life happened and I was struck. Now I just need to keep letting the practice in.
Thank you, Kim. That's sort of how I feel, but I could not speak it that well. Thank you. Joel.
Hi, Ellen. Also, thank you so much for this question. Um, I had I had a little trouble starting when as you were describing the instructions. I thought, well, where could I start? What's true? What I ended up speaking about mostly in my small group I was with, Genève, as a matter of fact, and was the impact of Sangha. And in particular, the emphasis, the development over the last year of Soji and Samu practice over the last year, something that has been formalized on Friday mornings. Brief, but the instruction each week of pay attention to what you're doing and pay attention to, actually, this is not in the weekly instructions, but I remember from early on that a quote from Flint, no doubt going way back, about making the world your altar, and to see the sacred in everything, and that everything is sacred, and that an altar is a space where you recognize the sacredness of what's being enacted at that place, and to take that out of an interior focus to an exterior focus, so that what I think of it as in line with Dogen's instructions, so that the 10,000 things can come forward and realize themselves with you, is that the Soji Samu practice has opened that for me. And that has been a wonderful support for my practice this year. Now, on the other hand, every time I sit down, I am just shocked at how fast my mind is cascading, and how my thoughts arise so fast and demand so much energy, and yet over some brief period of time, I can recognize that there's the space they're arising in, those thoughts are arising in, which is not being altered. It's like the clouds going across the sky. The sky is not altered by the cloud. But to have that experience over and over again, and to me, it's something about realizing that the Buddha nature is not the cloudless sky. It's the clouds and the sky. It's the thoughts and the emptiness around it. Thank you for this opportunity to explore that.
So much, Joel. So we're getting near our time, but there's probably time for one more. Is there anybody else? I see Rosemary.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much. So this sort of came to me as everybody was speaking now, that sitting is like, it's this, it shines a light on the self and grounds me in my body. And at the same time, in community, it it ensures that I'm connected, and the whole interdependence thing happens at the same time. So it's kind of very you know, kind of the word whole comes to mind. That yeah, and embodiment was something that I thought of right away when you began to speak. That the embodiment supports me. The routine, the service, the forms, all of these things, the chanting, it all supports my practice, as well as, and doing this in community. Yeah. And trying to have a routine when I can't sit with Sangha as well. And meeting with the teacher, my relationship with Flint, and the intimacy that is created through, I think, the sitting and the Sangha together, and the Dharma, everything you spoke about. So yeah, it all kind of interweaves, like you said. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to pick everything apart, isn't it? Like you say, a whole. Thank you guys. I think we're at the end of our time. Am I correct?
Say something?
Sure, I could talk.
And
Yeah, yeah, I think about the actuality of my practice and my life, and what really encourages me is my connections with other people, talking with other people about the Dharma, about our practice. But I was also aware that I still hope for enlightenment.
oh,
That I think that supports my Zazen practice. The idea that, and I know this is not very Buddhist correct to say, but the idea that by doing this, I will become enlightened, that my life will change. So that still exists in my head.
yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I think it was it was my total objective for a long time, but who knows what that enlightenment is and when we get to it. So, yeah, and even if you know, Anne, even if you know maybe that's not so true, it's still something that affects us. I mean, Dogen says it's enlightened activity, but it's so easy to like want to gain something from it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in support of that, you do gain something from it. I mean, there's lots
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
Oh, Anne, thank you so much for that. Okay, I think we really are at the end of our time. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that you've offered.